What's going on, everybody? Ben here with Deep Read, and today I'm going to be doing my first ever book haul. We are once again in an outdoor setting. With how my living situation is right now, I'm actually back home with my parents for a little bit in between apartments. I'm hopefully going to start looking again here soon, but there's a lot of people in the house, makes it hard to record videos. So I come out here and it's nice and peaceful, and it's a nice vibe, nice aesthetic for the channel, I think. So if you guys like this, I have no problem continuing to do this. I would obviously like to have my own home studio where I can kind of make videos without having to move the camera around and, you know, set things up and worry about audio distractions and stuff like that. It'll be nice to have a permanent place, but if you guys like these outdoor videos, I will certainly continue to do a few of them as we go. So today, this haul actually came from about a week ago. I have a store that I go to near where I live that I get pretty much all of my books from, unless I travel somewhere else and I visit a local bookstore where I'm traveling. I usually only shop at this store, and the reason for that is because they are entirely a volunteer donations-based store, so they pretty much price all their books the exact same. I mean, there's some discrepancies in prices, but for the most part, we're talking like $2, $3, $4 at most that you're gonna be spending on pretty much any book you can find in there. And they have a huge selection of basically anything that you can think of. So that is my go-to store. This haul came from my visit last week. So let's go ahead and jump right into it with the first book. So let's go ahead and start things off with probably my favorite book that I got in this haul. This is Genius by Harold Bloom, a mosaic of 100 exemplary creative minds. Now, Harold Bloom was probably the most prominent literary critic for sure in the English-speaking world. So what he does in this book is he takes 100 literary geniuses from throughout history, which spans from Homer all the way up to Shakespeare, all the way up to 20th century writers, Robert Frost, Hemingway. And what he does is he creates sets. He puts these authors into sets in this book. Thematic similarities between them, from the Bible to Socrates, through the transcendent achievements of Shakespeare and Dante, down through the ages to Hemingway, Faulkner, and Ralph Ellison. The author explores the numerous parallels between his chosen geniuses and the surprising ways they have influenced one another over the centuries. So essentially, he's putting these authors into different categories that he explains in this book, his reasoning for each category, and gives his analysis of each author. And he puts a paragraph at the beginning of each section explaining his reasoning for why he thinks these authors should be fit in these groups together. Basically, it's just rich, full of all kinds of analyses of famous writers. You can see William Wordsworth right there. He'll analyze certain passages from them. With the limited time that we have to read, it's really good to have a book like this because you don't have to read this from cover to cover. And it's a good way to become familiar with authors that you may not read their works. So definitely excited about this one. It's a really good copy too. It's in pretty good condition. There's some bends in the pages at the bottom there, but other than that, I mean, for $3, this is just a great find. So definitely my favorite piece that I got from this haul. This next one, it really stuck out to me because I actually have not read the Iliad. I've read the Odyssey, but I've not read the Iliad. I would like to, and I need to, but this is The War That Killed Achilles by Caroline Alexander. What are the real lessons of war, it says at the top. So this just looks like a really interesting analysis of the Iliad as a statement on war. And it looks like she's going to focus specifically on the character of Achilles. See, it says in the flap here, few warriors in life or literature have challenged their commanding officer in the rationale of the war they fought as fiercely as did Homer's Achilles. And I really like the way the cover, that kind of gold metallic look right there. I think that looks really cool. But we don't just buy books for the covers, we buy them because we're gonna learn from them. This looks like a really interesting read. Again, I have not read the Iliad, but I know the story. This looks like a great way to kind of get an analysis from that perspective of the rationale behind war, especially because I really read a lot about modern warfare, especially, you know, the First World War, Second World War, that kind of stuff. So getting this kind of analysis from such an ancient form of combat, I think is going to be a really fascinating perspective. John Steinbeck is probably the bane of most high school students because most of us probably had to read The Grapes of Wrath, which I'm not saying anything against it. Of course, great work, one of the great pieces of American literature. but when you're a high schooler, it can be a tough read to get through. But this book right here, East of Eden, is supposed to be his magnum opus. Now, I actually don't know anything about the story of this book. I have just seen all kinds of posts online about it, you know, rave reviews. I think John Steinbeck himself calls it his magnum opus, if I'm not mistaken. This Penguin Steinbeck Centennial Edition, I think, is just a beautiful, gorgeous copy of this book. Now, this book was written in 1952 originally, so this is obviously a new edition. In his journal, Steinbeck called East of Eden the first book, in quotes, and indeed, it has the primordial power and simplicity of myth. Set in the rich farmland of California's Salinas Valley, this sprawling and often brutal novel follows the intertwined destinies of two families, the Trasks and the Hamiltons, whose generations helplessly reenact the fall of Adam and Eve and the poisonous rivalry of Cain and Abel. So definitely probably going to be a lot of biblical comparisons in this book. Hopefully I can get to reading this soon. I've got a lot of books on my reading list, but this is definitely one that is sticking out to me, having read The Grapes of Wrath. Again, I was one of those kids who did not enjoy it at the time. Probably would need to reread that as well from my older, more literary inclined perspective. But this is a great thing to have, especially for the price I got it, $2. I don't know if you can see it, $2 for that. Crazy. All right, next up, Tolstoy. What can there be said about Tolstoy that hasn't already been said? Anna Karenina is supposed to be one of the greatest novels ever written. Some people say the greatest, and this is a great copy, a Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition from 2000. So about 24 years old, 25 years old, and it is in excellent condition. A little bit of a crease mark on the spine there, but for, again, price I got it, no problem at all. With these Russian novels, of course, you know, what they say about Russian novels, just how just utterly dense and thick these books are. This is a 800-page novel, and I am sure that getting through this takes time, it takes a lot of patience, but I'm sure the benefits are more than rewarding versus the time that you'd spend reading this. Anna Karenina has beauty, social position, wealth, a husband, and an adored son, but her existence seems empty. When she meets the dashing officer Count Vronsky, she rejects her marriage and turns to him to fulfill her passionate nature, with devastating results. One of the world's greatest novels, Anna Karenina is both an immortal drama of personal conflict and social scandal and a vivid, richly textured panorama of 19th century Russia. Definitely excited to dig into this. Of course, Tolstoy is known for his amazing prose that he uses throughout all of his works, and I'm sure this one is probably the best example of that. So again, like with East of Eden, I don't know when I'm going to get around to reading this, but one of these days, would love to say that I've read it. So this next one, this is another author that I've heard a lot about, but I'm not super familiar with his works. This is Thinking of Home, William Faulkner's letters to his mother and father, 1918 to 1925. So William Faulkner is one of those American novelists that was famous in the early to mid 20th century. He was a Southerner, and he's considered one of the greatest authors of Southern literature in American history. And this book is literally just a collection of letters that he wrote to his mom and dad in his 20s while he was traveling away from home. I believe, let's see, he traveled to, so he's from Mississippi. He spent time in New Haven, New York, and Canada, and his visits to New Orleans, the Gulf Coast, and Europe. So he was going all over the place during his 20s, and this is a bunch of letters that he wrote to his parents. And I think as a young man who's probably about the same age as he was when he was writing this, this will definitely be a bit more of a personable read, because it's really just his intimate writings to his parents. Ever since we left New York, we've been going along the Hudson River. The sun on the Palisades is wonderful, and West Point like a grim medieval fortress glowering at us. Carrying on, sure enough now. Toronto in the morning. I shall write tomorrow and tell you in detail how I came out of the RCFRM in New York. Another cadet and I are making the trip together. Wish you were here, Billy. So stuff like that. Just quick, short notes about his day written to his parents, but pretty personal. You can really sense the longing he has, you know, for his family as he's away. So I definitely would like to get into this. I really want to get more of his works, but I think this is just it's one of those books that you can kind of just open and read, you know, a section real quick and close it and put it away and then come back later. So another good thing to have, I think, on the bookshelf. And then my one history book that I got on this trip. This is a concise history of the Russian Revolution by Richard Pipes. I really needed a book on the actual Russian Revolution itself. I have books about Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky, Russia's involvement in World War I, all the different characters, but I don't have a book that kind of gives you an actual full history of the revolution itself. So I grabbed this, and I think it's just going to be a good resource, especially because I would like to do a video essay on the Russian Revolution. Of course, it's great to have something like this where I can kind of go through it and find out what I need to know. But it's actually about 400 pages, believe it or not, and I think 400 pages is more than enough for me to get what I need to understand the Russian Revolution. Such an important event in history, and really probably the most important event, it can be argued, in the 20th century, just with how much it impacted world politics and history with the rise of fascism and all that stuff. So definitely glad to have found this. Okay, these are a little different. I don't usually buy or read plays, but a friend who volunteers at the bookstore recommended these two to me. They're both by the same author, Bertolt Brecht. This one right here looks really interesting. It's a play about Galileo. The play which most strongly stamped on my mind a sense of Brecht's great stature as an artist of the theater was Galileo. Galileo is an entirely contemporary view of the events of our atomic age and in relation to certain problems of conscience. So it looks like this is kind of a modern interpretation of these kind of scientific revolutions of Galileo's time versus this book, which was written in 1943. So before the atomic bomb, but obviously we knew what atoms were by this point, and we had really developed atomic theory even with how young it was at the time. Probably one of the few plays that I'll actually read. This other one right here is Mother Courage by the same author. It says, written in 1939, Mother Courage and Her Children saw its first stage production in Zurich in 1941, but it took the triumphant Paris visit of the Berlin Ensemble in 1954 to establish the play as one of the authentic masterpieces of the modern age. Mother Courage is the play in which Brecht made his most passionate statement against war, but perhaps Brecht's greatest achievement in the drama lies in the creation of the character of Anna Fearling, nicknamed Mother Courage, the itinerant trader who drags her canteen through the blood and carnage of the 30 Years' War, and whose fatal error is to believe that she can make war to serve her ends. So both of these just look like they've got a lot of philosophical aspects to them and relate a lot to our modern age. This author, I found out, was actually a devout Marxist who fled Germany in the 1930s. I think he went to Scandinavia first, and then he came to America, where obviously he was still somewhat of a target, obviously with the FBI keeping an eye on him, knowing about his Marxism. He actually ended up being investigated by the House Un-American Activities Committee. I think altogether it's just super interesting given that story about the author and also the content of these books based off of what I know about them so far. Of course, being recommended by a very knowledgeable friend who knows a lot about literature. Definitely glad to have these in my collection. Okay, and last but not least, we go back to Tolstoy. And I would know I was talking about how long his novels are and the tendency of Russian literature to be just these thick, dense books. Nice and short, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. This right here is definitely going to be my intro book to Tolstoy, as it probably is with most people, given how short it is. This is actually one of his later works. It came out in 1886, and it comes at a time after he had spent, I think it was the 1870s, going through a crisis, really, as he really was struggling with the thought of his inevitable death. I mean, it says here, the death of Ivan Ilyich marked the close of Tolstoy's great crisis of faith, which preoccupied him for nearly the whole of the 1870s, and during which the thought that he must die harassed him almost to the point of insanity. The very rationality of death became for him the most irrational thing of all. That's a good quote. He felt he could not live if there was death. People have frequently complained of the manner in which death interrupts their work or play. Casanova on his deathbed resented being thrust out of life before the end of the show, and Simone de Beauvoir states that the reason why death fills us with anxiety is that it is the inescapable reversal of our projects. But Tolstoy's anti-death mania went far beyond such thinking and led him into a labyrinth where, just when, by means of some religious or philosophical trick, he thought he had shaken off his pursuer, he would turn a corner and meet him face to face. And this story, it follows a court judge, a careerist, who really has never had to think about death because of being so invested with his work and just the mundaneness of his life that he never had to confront death. And then he ends up in a situation where now he has to confront death face to face. So it's really it's a great mirror into what Tolstoy was probably going through mentally during that time of his great existential crisis. So haven't read it yet, but I think this is one I'm going to probably start reading very, very shortly, and I'll probably post some kind of review. So I haven't even read it, and I'm already going to say, you should probably read this book. All right, folks, and that wraps up our book haul for today. I think this is a solid collection. I always like to try and get a nice, diverse haul when I go to the store. It kind of helps me delve into each of my broad interests, and it helps keep me aware of the different ideas, the different authors that exist out there in the world. If you guys enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Please give me a comment on what you think. I've got more content coming in the future. I've already got a couple things filmed. I'm gonna try to just keep things going, keep uploading things, and if you guys enjoy the content, let me know. If there's things I need to work on, please let me know, because again, I am so new to this and I definitely would love to get some pointers into things that I can do better, and suggestions. If you guys have suggestions, please give them to me. I would love to know what kind of things you guys would like to see, and that also includes book suggestions. If there's things based off of what you see here that you think I might enjoy, please recommend it, because I am like a sponge. I want to know what other people are reading. I want to know what other people think about these kinds of books. So please feel free to comment any of that kind of stuff. I would greatly appreciate it. I think that about sums up everything today, so I will see you guys in the next video.